Welcome to the 2025 K-State Garden Hour webinar series. We are so glad you're here. This webinar series started back in 2020 and has been a collaboration of the entire K-State Horticulture Extension team. Since the start of the program, we have reached over 83,000 gardeners just like you. We are pleased to continue offering the K-State Garden Hour series for free. If you have enjoyed these educational webinars, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to support the program. The link to donate can be found in the chat or on our K-State Garden Hour website. This webinar is hosted by K-State Research and Extension. My name is Andrea Burns, and I am the Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Horticulture Agent in Ford County, Kansas. Everyone involved in the development of this series is an extension professional from K-State. Most of us have a background in horticulture education or a related discipline, but most of all, we each have a love for educating and sharing important garden topics. I have been very fortunate to be able to be a part of this horticulture extension professional team, and I have learned a lot from them, and we are also struggling a little bit with some gardening challenges out here in Southwest Kansas with some water issues and it being very dry, and learning to adapt and garden in a different way. So we're glad you're here. We hope you can learn a little bit and can answer some questions. Before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping things I want to cover. Please use the question and answer feature for questions related to the presentation. This is where we'll look for the questions at the end of the webinar during the question and answer session. You should see a button along the bottom tab that says Q&A, and you will be able to enter your question there, and there will be people that will direct those questions to our presenter. Today's webinar is also being recorded and we will post it to our Garden Hour website. We will typically upload the additional resources listed in each related to each topic as well. If we share links throughout the chat, we will also list them on the website. Our website is also where you would go to access previous topics, upcoming topic, and other upcoming topics in the series. Our moderators today are Calla Edwards, Horticulture Agent from Butler County, and Laura Phillips, Horticulture Agent from Meadowlark District, and they will be sharing the information through the chat during the presentations. They will also help us facilitate the Q&A question portion of the webinar. Today's topic is maximizing water efficiency through drip irrigation. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Greg Eyestone, Horticulture Agent in Riley County. Please give us a few moments to transition to the presentation slides, and we hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Andrea. I want to thank everybody for participating today, and maybe there'll be several that will, watch this at a later time as we get more into the growing season, and hope we encourage you to come back and review anything that you might have missed or just need some more information on. In Extension, we like to share a lot of our resources, and since Pam Paulsen already had a pretty good presentation put together, I made some changes, but a lot of this goes credit to Pam. Pam would be on our call here today. She might speak in once in a while, but I don't know if I asked her if I could use that permission, and so sometimes it's better just to ask for forgiveness. Hopefully she's saying, yes, I can use it. Otherwise, it's a very short presentation. You might see Cheryl Boyer stepping in here now. She's we're trying something a little bit different. I haven't practiced this, so she's here to support me, but we may be switching cameras now and then, and so appreciate her help as well, as along with all the others on the call today. Water's our topic. We're talking drip irrigation, but I think it falls back to having the opportunity, the resource to have water, whether it's for our own consumption, which is really important, and as well as maybe watering our gardens when needed. So water is one of our hot topics at K-State Research and Extension, and so appreciate you being here again, and want to make sure that we're focusing on our water quantity and quality. Now, some of you may prefer another type of liquid refreshment, and I wanted to put a shout out for those people, make sure that we have ample water for that as well. And since our demographics indicate there's maybe a different population likes different products, I wanted to include this type of beverage as well, particularly with a football game coming up that some of us are interested this weekend. So just wanted to focus again that water's our topic. For gardeners, you know, maybe we're focusing on desirable plants, beautiful plants, plants that produce fruit, vegetables for us. If you've been on any of our programs, you've probably seen this slide before. It's probably our keynote flower picture. I'll just tell you right now, that's Vista Bubblegum, the pink petunia in there. So if you want to purchase that, it grows very large. There's probably only a dozen or so petunias there that take up space. But as gardeners, this is probably what we're most interested in right now is growing our plants and making them beautiful and healthy. Water is not readily available to us. We don't have an endless supply. And as gardeners, we need to utilize that water the best we can. Many of our irrigation, these previously practices may have wasted quite a bit of that irrigation water. So we want to do a better job at keeping that resource available and utilizing it. And so the EPA has these different slides that you can go and look at later if you'd like to, as far as making sure that our irrigation system, whether we're overwatering our plants or our system isn't functioning well, this is something to take into consideration, that our irrigation systems do need some maintenance. It's not necessarily carefree. Quick story, I was a property manager in Kansas City area for our summer. My purpose was to make sure the landscapes were beautiful, take care of insects, weeds, those kind of things. But it turned it into be mostly irrigation maintenance process. And so I didn't really appreciate that over time. And so just indicated to me how much maintenance is required in keeping these systems running efficiently for us. Some plant growth strategies you may want to consider. You know, some of our plants, we're just trying to maintain them, keep them alive. And so those are probably going to use less water, less frequent water applications. And so that may be a plant strategy that you want to implement, but maybe you're trying to really increase the growth. And so we're probably going to need to do a little more supplemental watering is what I like to call it. So you'll need to add water when the plants are needing that. And just depends on the strategy, which one you're working towards as far as which plant growth you're going to try to accomplish. So as far as an example in our soils, what we're working with is the pore space. We say that's about 50% of what's available in the soil profile. So ideally, if you're trying to grow your plants quickly and as healthy as you can, if you're growing them for commercial production and or trying to sell them, we kind of like to keep that soil profile about 50%, or excuse me, 25% water, 25% air. So maybe the drip irrigation runs every day, but you let it dry out to a little bit. So you're kind of keeping it at that even 25% air, 25% water. Probably harder to do in the landscape itself than it is in a commercial operation or a greenhouse, but that may be our goal. Just depends on what your goal is for your plants. I want to put a shout out to the mesonet. Some may call it the mesonet. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Tomato. but this is a resource that's available for at least certain parts here in Kansas. There may be other types of programs in other states. So I just highlighted the Manhattan site. We actually have 3 different weather stations. And in December of the 2nd, I took a screenshot, and our soil profile 2 inches down was about 74% saturated. To me, that would say I don't need to water. Of course, in December, I'm not really watering plants outside anyway, but that would be an indicator. One of our sites had 100% saturated. That's not good for our plants at all. So that definitely wouldn't be a watering situation. But just wanted to show you that there is this out there, soil moisture, and it gives you readings at different depths of the soil. And at least here in December, we wouldn't need to have been watering our plants because our soils were pretty moist at that time. This doesn't take readings when the soil's frozen, so don't go on today and expect to see a lot of good information. But once we get into growing season, I think you'll have some opportunity to check out your soil, maybe close by you, to see what the soil profile is doing. When we think about irrigation, this kind of comes to my mind, seeing that sprinkler head pop up and shoot water droplets or fine mist everywhere. And in some situations, that may be a good thing, but probably even our most efficient overhead, above ground type of irrigation is 75%, 83% efficient. That's in a perfect kind of situation. So they're not 100% perfect, whereas drip irrigation, you can get at least 95% efficiency on that. So that might have been a quiz question at some point. So they are very effective as far as providing water to the plants, whereas these may not be as well. There's still a place for some hand watering. Obviously, when you just plant a plant, you're probably going to use some type of overhead hand watering. My process is collect rainwater off the roof and use my watering can to water my plants. I wouldn't do what this guy's doing too often. He's kind of just cooling his thumb. Probably want to put a water breaker on that to spread that water out a little bit. But there is still place for hand watering, even with any of our irrigation systems that we decide we want to try to use. So now we're getting into more of the drip irrigation. Drip irrigation emitter is going to drip water slowly and directly into the soil. Most water conserving method. Again, it's 95% effective of using that water. The drip irrigation is going to work by placing that water slowly directly into the soil. Many small water emitters typically are utilized and placed 1 or more at each plant in the emitter line, which is snaked around the planting bed. And drip is excellent for watering slopes. Many of us may not just have a flat land that we're trying to irrigate. And so this is very good as far as providing water evenly. I think that's the thing about drip irrigation, is it provides that even amount of water throughout whatever the irrigation system's in. We had that spray head, and there's going to be areas that get more water and less water. And so these are very efficient way of making sure we're getting good distribution of our irrigation supply. Only about half as much water may be needed by using the drip irrigation, and we're going to be watering only the root zone. Take a look at that here in a moment. Going to have less money spent for water that we don't need or gets wasted. No wind displacement. Diseases may be lessened because of the foliage remaining dry, and less weeds because the aisles remain dry. You're just watering the desirable plant and not the weeds. Just chime in here quickly, some resources that we utilized online to come up with some of these bullet points. The Colorado State Extension has a good publication for home drip irrigation systems. I think they'll be putting that in the chat. And K-State has one for community gardens. We'll find out how long you run a drip system, and that comes a challenge in community garden if you're not allowed to utilize the water for a couple hours, but we do have that resource available for you as well. So those kind of orange little stringy things are supposed to represent roots. Some people have questioned me what that's all about. But some of our plants have shallower roots or not as many root hairs, and so therefore it's best to water a little bit more frequently and not as deep. Something I might put on that turf, blueberries and strawberries. I might add onions. They don't have a very deep root system either. So if you're getting moisture down 2 to 6 inches, you're probably hitting the root zone that is most effective at keeping that plant healthy and growing. Cool season plants, whether that's um, snapdragons, pansies, those are flowers, or if we're looking at broccoli or any of our cool season vegetables, if you get moisture down 9 to 12 inches, that's very well irrigated. And of course, it's going to be a little bit on age, maturity of those plants as they develop that root system down that far. Warm season plants, 12 to 18 inches is typically where their root zone is to gather up moisture and nutrients and oxygen as well. And trees, of course, they can have a deeper root system, but most of them, their functioning roots for our health of our plants are at that kind of 12-inch line. So I can't remember a lot of things, but if you look at all those, the common denominator is 12 inches in there. And so if our soil is moist down to 12 inches as our plants mature, I think we're doing a good job at keeping that soil profile where it needs to be for plant growth. I just threw the slide in real quick as far as a tree matures, those roots span a long ways out from the trunk. And so a drip line, if you're watering this, you have lots of opportunity to put drip emitters throughout the whole root zone. But as a tree matures like this, it's probably pretty well set off to handle whatever natural rainfall you're getting. How do we determine how far that moisture is getting into the ground? Well, if you have a long finger, you can stick your finger in there, but typically some type of apparatus is better. So there's different options here. As far as a metal rod seems to works better than a wooden dowel. I've had issues with those breaking on me, but there's some different opportunities here. I would really encourage you, if you're a master gardener or a gardener, the soil probe is a great tool to use, whether it's taking for soil samples and just sort of checking your moisture profile. So those are different options that you may consider. Now, soil probe may cost you $75, $80, but if you're going to test your soil once a week, maybe it's worth that investment. Going back to the Mesonet, there's another resource that's there. And what I like about this one is it gives you your daily rainfall, gives you the whole year. If you were a gardener here in Manhattan, Kansas, we got off pretty well as far as some natural rainfall. I know we're all in the red there, but we're not far in the red as far as what I'm looking at over here. We were doing really well. If we come down and take a look, the brown is kind of our mean or average, and the green was what was actually coming out, and the black ones or the stripes was how much rain we got that particular day. We were doing great until we got into September. Then we dipped, and it didn't rain in Manhattan for 2 months. So at that point, I probably would have turned on my drip irrigation to maybe help my plants out. Those established probably were just on their own. But if I was trying to grow some particular vegetable or something like that, probably some supplemental irrigation would have been beneficial for that crop. So again, at least here in Kansas, this resource is available. Doesn't hit everybody, but it can give you an example at least of how the weather's going or the amount of moisture we're getting for the season. We have different soil textures, and they're going to accept water at different rates and store water at different rates. And so this is just an example. This is actually a movie. I don't have it so we can play it, but water's dripping out of those beakers and going into the different soil textures. And you can just see over the same amount of time how the water flowed into the different soil types. The sandy one I would have thought wouldn't have spread out quite as far and gone down maybe deeper. That would be a common sense thing that you'd think sandy soils would be. But this was an actual example. So the clay loam, going to hold moisture a long time, but it's going to be a slow infiltration rate for it. A lot of people around here claim they have clay or some other type of word for that type of our soils we have. This was an example of a garden that I went to here in Manhattan area, and they put in a drip irrigation, if you will. It's mostly a soaker hose, the Ooze hose. So this process can work. We just know that there's going to be more pressure and more water volume coming out of the front of that than there is to the end. So it doesn't give you the even distribution of moisture like a true drip system is. And this may work just fine for you, but just understand if this is the route you want to go, maybe more cost effective, not sure, but you are going to get more water flow from the front of where it comes in than to the tail end. Something K-State recommends, maybe looping that so you get a little bit more pressure evenly distributed through this soaker hose or Ooze type of hose. So it works pretty good for a tree. You just get you a Y connector and hook the front and the back end together. Some of these long runs, again, you're going to get more water pressure towards the front of that than you will towards the end. Now, if you put your raised bed or what have you on a slope, maybe the water will follow the slope down towards the other end. You get good distribution. But this is a lot of people use these and just want to understand, the process and where your water is actually going to end up when you select this type of drip irrigation. This is the gist of everything we're going to talk about remaining here, the drip irrigation components and how they work together. It's a pretty good diagram, your valve, whether it's just your faucet off your house or what have you. We're going to have a backflow preventer. We're going to have our pressure regulator because we're using very low pressure for our drip system. A filter to make sure that the emitters don't get plugged up. Just an adapter so you can connect it together, your hose, and on this diagram, these emitters says a minimum of 18 inches apart. I wouldn't put that as a guaranteed something. The ones I use are 12 inches apart, but that depends on your soil texture, what we're trying to accomplish. There's some factors that go into the spacing of that. And then you have an end cap, a way to back that water up so we have some pressure. So we're going to go into each of these a little bit. Your backflow preventer, just in case there happens to be like a water line break or something that would happen to take some water from your system back into the water source. I did a little search online, $6.44. So not too expensive, something to kind of prevent some issues that could slightly happen. But we put these on, anti-siphoning valve, volume, vacuum breaker, if you will, creates that airspace, again, just so we're not taking a potential contaminant that's in your system back into our portable water. So you get one of those, $6. They don't last real long. You might run and replace them every couple of years. These are plastic materials. Filter. Definitely need to filter your water, whether you're getting municipal water or you're pulling it out of a pond or stream or something. It's going to just prevent the plugging of our emitters. You have some type of screen in there. This will be your screen filter. There's also inline filter options. They're less expensive, but they're harder to maintain. So I don't have an example of that today, but those are available. But this is your YT type of filter, and you can easily remove it and clean it and flush it out. So those are available. $12.22 I got offline. So that's kind of a ballpark figure. So not too pricey, and might have lasted 20 years. I haven't really changed any components, so they can last a while. Pressure regulator. We definitely need to slow down the water pressure, particularly coming from the house, municipal type of source. And so you see that they're rated at different PSI, 15, 20, 25. I think the ones I have are 15, just like the example here. But there are adjustable ones available out there as well. And they just connect up to your hose bib or somewhere in there. I've seen them in different places coming right off the faucet or after your filter. So I don't think it matters. I'm not an engineer, but it seems to work all right. And again, a price tag somewhere around $7 to get that. Those may not last forever either. You may need to replace those once in a while. Lots of tubing options. The PVC, the white tubing up there is for high pressure. So if you have high pressure coming in, you might want to use that type of piping to kind of a header to get it to where you're going to go with your irrigation. Then we use the drip tubing, the polyethylene, the plastic stuff, and we have some examples we'll look at here in a moment that we utilize. UV resistant, 15 to 25 years. Again, mine's been sitting out in the sun basically for 20 years. I don't bring it in the winter time per se. Lazy or just the way it works in my lifestyle. So they last a while. Still haven't had to replace mine yet. They haven't become brittle. They are flexible. I don't know if they lose their flexibility as they age, but they are pretty easy to cut. We'll do that here in a moment. You can cover it with mulch if you don't like the look of it. I leave mine uncovered. Nobody's complained, but to each his own. But I leave mine uncovered, just easier to work with. And as we do check the emitters to make sure they're working, you can just see them dripping out of the emitters versus trying to find a wet spot in the mulch or what have you. Usually about a 1/2 inch diameter. There's my example. It's a 5/8 diameter one for $43, but typically 1/2 inch is what you might find. And they sold in rolls 50 to 500 feet and can be found at lots of different places. Maybe not quite this time of the year, but as we get rolling into spring, many of the box stores will carry this. The hardware type of stores, lumber yards, will have those readily available. And or go to your nurseries. I like to utilize my nursery as much as possible. Drip tubing. So this one has inline emitters. I don't know if you can kind of see the little bumps in there. So it's already got the emitters in the tubing. And so this price is actually a little cheaper than the other one, but just depends on if you're going to water a flower bed or if you're watering something where you don't need emitters every 12 to 18 inches apart, whether you want to use inline emitter tubing or ones where you put your own emitters in where you need them for the plants. So different options for different uses. I threw this in there just as a reference. If you buy a garden hose, 5/8 for 100 feet, it's $90. So the drip hose isn't more expensive or anything like that in this comparison. So the drip line may last a little longer than my garden hose. So there's just different ways of looking at how you want to spend your money and how to water plants and the best way to do that. So the drip tubing here, so this is showing the inline emitter that we had to add to where we wanted it for our plants. This one we had the inline emitter, so it's next to the plant to provide the watering. So just two different application ways of putting down your drip tubing. There's another type of drip tubing called spaghetti type. It's going to be much smaller, typically used for maybe like container gardening, can be used to water other plants if you want to not have your line, just different ways of doing it. We'll have some examples here in a little bit, but typically it again is used maybe more for containers. You place the emitter right at the plant itself. So let's say you're snaking your line through the planting, but you can't quite get up to your plant. And so this kind of makes another extension to get it a little closer to the individual plants that you're trying to water. I don't know if Pam wants to chime in. Some of these are her pictures. This is just a diagram of a way to run water to different plantings, whether it's overhead hanging baskets. Some of your commercial nurseries, you'll see these type of examples of ways to water plants. So just another example.
Here's Pam.
Hey, Pam, you have anything better to say about this?
I do this with my containers and put them on a timer. So then if I'm out of town or something, that makes it real handy to make sure they're still getting watered.
Great. How do you keep your emitters in the pot itself?
If you do the spaghetti tubes, there's the weights on them and those will stay in. Also use just the metal pins like you use for ground cloth and sink them in there too.
Great, great. Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. So there's all kinds of fittings. We'll show some examples here and we'll look at them. Ways to do this. One of the nice things about the flexible polyurethane type of product is it kind of snakes through. And so you can get them fairly close to your plants. You don't have to use a lot of T's and elbows, but sometimes that works better for you. So we'll take a look at some of those. And some of these fittings, I'll show you that we have compression fittings where you just push them on and they attach to the tubing. I would suggest you do this in warmer weather. It just seems to work better. We do have some locking type of applications, and we have several types of barbed fittings, and we'll show you those here in a moment. So there's some diagrams or pictures of some of the different fittings that we have. Most of these are barbed, so you just would, on a warm day, push it into your piping and it'll hold. These are some end caps, so you can, this is a compression fitting. So you just put your pipe in there. This has a valve, so you can, or just cap, so you can unscrew it so that you flush out your irrigation system once in a while and then tighten it back up. This other one here is just you bend your pipe over, and this keeps it kind of pinched, and so that builds the water pressure so it comes back out of the emitters. I worked at a botanical garden, and sometimes these broke and we didn't have them, and so we just used tape and taped the pipe together with the pinch, and so cut it off when we needed to drain it or to clean it out. So so these are just some options that are available, and there's of course more than you need options. The barbed fittings are maybe the more common ones that are available, and we use those to connect different, whether it be emitters or tubing together. And it's nice to have this little tool here that punches holes in the piping. Cheryl, do we want to try and go live with this other camera and see if we can? Do I need to stop sharing?
Yes. Right. Oh, okay. Here we go.
Okay. There we go. Bring something into view. So this is one type of piping, and then there's these types of clamps that can just be screwed down. So if you have a leak, we had a specialist that was talking about drip irrigation, and the person was asked, well, it's leaking, and the answer that the specialist gave was, well, the whole thing leaks. And so if you have some little leaks here and there, hopefully it's not a huge problem, but so this is a clamp we can use. Let's see what else I want to show. As far as connections, just getting it hooked up to your pipe, there's different ones. This is the compression one we saw a picture of, and we'll just push that. You just push it in there. Again, you want to do it when it's warm and it'll hold fast. Here's one with a barbed connection. So we would just push it in there, and it'd probably be well enough that it wouldn't leak, but if you needed to, you could put a clamp, tighten that clamp down. This just hooks up to your garden hose. There's just another example of a plastic one that we have. I wanted to show you this other clamp because Matthew's on our call today from Sedgwick County, and he gave me one of these. He wouldn't give me the tool that you utilize to do this, but this is one you just have a plier, so to speak, and it pinches it close. He likes that tool, so didn't want to lose it. But there's different clamps that we can utilize. But most of the times, the compression and the barb, we don't really need clamps. So if this is our piping that we're using, this one actually has an inline emitter, but we may want to put another emitter into it. And so I'm going to use my tool that just punches a hole in the plastic. I first started out with a nail doing that, and after about 3, my hand was done with the nail, so I ended up buying a tool. But you just make your hole in there, and your emitter has a barb on it. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it'll just pop in there. Worked in practice. Sometimes you got to turn it, but anyway, so there you have a emitter where you want it next to your plant, and your plants grow, or you decide to move a plant and you don't need an emitter there anymore. Nice thing is you can pull them out, and you can put in, we'll show you a picture of a goof plug here in a little bit, but it's just going to fill that hole and just stick it back in there like the other one. And now you're not dripping out of that particular spot. So that's pretty easy to do. If I can do it, I know anybody in the world can do this. What else do we want to show? There's just a bunch of different fittings, you know, let's say your pipe breaks or something like that, and you can just put 2 pipes together. And these, again, is a barbed type, so it'll basically, if you do it on a warm day or got your piping warm, it'll just slip in there together, and now you fixed your piping. Or if you want to add on to your pipe. We'll see a picture in a moment. I think Pam mentioned this too. You know, you got these pins if you want to keep your tubing in place. If it gets kicked around or something like that, you just stick this in the ground to hold it in place. One thing I did want to mention is I went to the store and bought my filter. And typically, if you go up to the store, there's these bins and they have different options for you. And so I pulled one out, looked at it, put it back, went to the other bin, pulled it out. Okay, I think this is the one I want. Grabbed it, went, bought it. And somebody hadn't actually put the right one back into the bin. And silly me, I'm the one who bought the one that wasn't the exact one I wanted. So if you see, this is the one I ended up buying. And that has a male adapter on it. And so that doesn't hook right up to your hose because it's a male adapter coming out. So I had to buy an adapter. This is probably the one I really wanted. I was ready to go to your hose. So the point is, be careful when you're buying your products that you're getting exactly what you're wanting. So here's a Y filter. Comes apart. Oh, I picked the one that I hadn't cleaned, and there's my filter that needs cleaning. So that's something somebody should do before we try to utilize it this spring. But so that's as easy as far as cleaning the filter goes. And you can always drain your filter too. So this is nice. So that just flushes out. In my situation, hard water, calcium. So try to flush that out. We do have our pressure regulator here. And I didn't put my backflow preventer on, but here's my backflow preventer that would just go on here. Well, that's just basically your starting point, and then you hook that up to your main line or to your drip hose. I think I've shown enough of those things. I'm not going to make us go back and forth. The last thing I'll show us while we're doing this is a way to convert. Let's say you have a spray head. Now this is going to have to be on its own line because you can't water your lawn and your flowers the same line. But this is a way to water, let's say, a pot or maybe a bunch of different shrubs together. And so these are on and off. And you just put your spaghetti tube into the adapter there, and so you can water your plants. And there'll be a picture of that coming up. But while I was here, let's show that. All right, I need to share again. Hey, hopefully we're back. All right, so that was just a few of the different pieces that you may need. I kind of showed you a little bit of that emitter inline product, and so that's what one looks like. Basically, what I understand is it just goes back and forth, reducing its tension and pressure, and then finally gives up and drops out of the line. So that's what the inline emitter is doing over here. And then this other product in this slide is a drip tape. So I don't have an example of that. It actually just lays flat on the ground when it doesn't have water in it. It's mostly, at least I've seen it used for commercial gardening, vegetables. It's kind of a 1 year type of use. And so it's not as sturdy as the other product. So it's a little cheaper. But that is available if you're into the commercial vegetable operation. That's probably more of what you're going to be using. This is more maybe a landscape or permanent type of product, typically is what I've seen it used as. So these push-in emitters, precise water placement, usually 1/2 to 2 gallons per hour. That's where I see a little issue of using them in a community garden. To water something for 2 hours, tying up the water line is a little challenging sometimes. But for the homeowner, I think we can do that. People ask me, well, how long do I run my irrigation system? How long do I let it drip? You know, we use that probe to see. For an example, we typically, if you plant a new tree, we recommend 5 gallons of water that week when it didn't rain. And so if this is putting out 2 gallons per hour, we're looking at 2.5 hours of that drip line running to get that 5 gallons. So you have to take some of this into consideration, the availability of how long you can run your irrigation system, what it takes for these to work. We're not wasting any water. It's not blowing away. It's not running off. So it's great. It's just going to take some time to get that water down into the soil. Lots of options as far as, you know, so let's say you have a 1/2 gallon per hour emitter. That's going to be better for the sandy soils because they can absorb that, or excuse me, the 2 gallons can absorb the water in a sandy soil. 1/2 gallon per hour is going to be your clay type soil. Showed you the goof plug. I've heard other names for it, but that will stop the drip. Put that in there. You get 25 of them for $14.75. I buy quite a few of these. Just somebody goofs up, moves their plants. So how could you use this in your landscape? This was an online slide that I borrowed from one of the extension services. So you can put in different ones. You know, if you're getting trees this big, I would hopefully they're on natural rainfall. But if you did need to drip them, if you're in a place where they don't get a lot of water and you still want trees, and it takes this. So this blue line here was just for the woody trees as a drip system. Those are probably going to run longer and less frequent. We had some smaller ones on this red zone, small shrubs and ground covers. Again, as they get established, they probably be on their own, I think, but you may need to run those. And then the purple zone going to the vegetables, probably going to run more frequently and maybe not as long just because they don't have as deep a root system over time. So this is an example of how you can set up your landscape if you needed to, as far as a drip diagram, but make it work for you. This is an example of my one of my raised beds and how I irrigate it when I need to. And I mostly drip inline emitters. There was a big header part on it that, as a conservative person, I just went and put my emitters in there just to match them up. So I didn't lose this. But on this end, of course, I'd hook up my filter and my pressure reducer and my vacuum breaker. And as you see here, I just crink my end of my hose over and tie it up so it'll produce the pressure for it to drip out. So that's one of my irrigation systems. This is my shrub border, and the red dot showing there's an emitter there for my shrubs that I moved in here. We'll put a shout out for fragrant viburnums. So these are all fragrant viburnums that sprout up in my yard because I got too many now that they like each other. So I get a bunch of little ones coming up. But this is how I'm irrigating those with an emitter around each plant when needed, which basically was not until September this year because we had moisture. Some diagrams on how to water trees. I spend some time in Colorado and I get to see some irrigation practices out there. And so this tree here, of course, most of us aren't going to plant our tree in an island sidewalk bed, but here's just some emitters put into the tubing, and then they had some spaghetti emitters going around to the other side of the plant tree to give you a little bit more distribution. It's going to have a limited space there, so it may need to run more often than your typical home lawn type of tree planting, but that's one example of how they're doing it. This here is on campus, our K-State Gardens maintenance facility. We put in an irrigation, had a demonstration of putting in an irrigation drip line, and I kind of questioned why we were doing it, but there's quite a bit of overhang. And so you may have a situation where you don't get much natural rainfall available to the plant. And so if you have a pretty good water breaker roof or whatever, this kind of worked out pretty good to keep those plants alive. You can see they've done pretty well over the years. And this purple circle over here was just showing they have a pin put over the tubing to try and keep it in place. Here in Manhattan, we have a roundabout that is subsurface drip irrigated. And so the turf has piping underneath the soil as well as the trees and shrubs. And talked to some people here on campus. We've done testing with this. It can work. The maintenance with any of these irrigation systems is some of those emitters under the soil can get plugged where their roots grow in there or what have you. You can have a line break and you don't notice what's broken right away. And so that's maybe the challenge of this when it's buried. You just don't know if it's functioning as well as it's supposed to. But those are applications that are available, and you may see more and more of those. This is the example that Pam had that just more common sense. Your sandy soil, it's going to drip down deeper and not spread out as far as, say, a clay type of soil. So again, you need to know your soil type. I'm going to leave this slide up for a moment. And if you don't get a screenshot of it or something, come back to it when you see the recording. I don't know. Basically, I put 1 emitter by 1 plant, but there's some suggestions here on the emitter, whether it needs to be a ½ gallon per hour or a gallon or 1 to 2, and how many emitters at the base of the plant or how spacing goes. Again, at least here in Manhattan, Kansas, I've lived here 60 years. We get water usually from the rain. And once our shrubs are 3 to 5 feet tall, I'm not real concerned about having an emitter for it. I may have to pull out my hose and water it once in a while, but just depends on your situation and how you want to grow your plants. So hopefully if this is needed, you can take a look at it or come back to it when you do the recording. Converting to drip, I mentioned that kind of briefly. We need to make sure it's on a line that we're not overwatering some plants and underwatering others, but we can convert some of our high rises over. This is a pet peeve. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second. Here in Manhattan, we had some planters put in downtown, so that's only about 10 feet by 8 feet, and they put in 10 spray heads to cover that. You know, what I would do, I wouldn't have done that in the first part, but if I came back in here, I would convert one of these risers and put in a drip connection, and we could have snaked the hose through there. They're just shrubs and they're established, and so basically they don't need the irrigation too much anymore. But somebody sells something to a municipality and we kind of go with it. We're still doing this. We're still building them and they're still doing it. We can fertilize through drip. Now we'd have to add some other connectors here. We'd put our backflow preventer on there and our pressure reducer and our filter, but you can get one of these siphon jets and mix your liquid fertilizer into there and let it drip through the system. So that's a possibility that we could do. Since I mentioned we have a football game coming up and you may not want to leave your house to do your watering, you can do the Bluetooth off on your phone and schedule your watering. And so those products are out there as far as a clock, but I don't know if it knows exactly when you need to water and when to stop. So there's a little bit of involvement in there. As gardeners, we enjoy that anyway, getting out there and seeing them. Drip kits, you can order these. You know, there may be some things you don't need in there. It does have the backflow preventer, water breaker. This has one of the inline filters, and then your pressure reducer, and then some connections. There are online companies, and maybe your own nursery would help you design and get you the parts you actually need for your typical garden. But that's an option as well. Maintenance, flush out the line first thing, clean the filter, do as I say, not as I do. Check for clogging and emitters, checks for leaks, and adjust system as plants grow. You see this drip line's kind of trees outgrown it. Different ways of just watering. You connect some spaghetti tube to take it over to your different plants. Quickly, drip maintenance. We do have some critters that like to use water as well as us, and so they may chew on our equipment, and we may need to go in there and fix that. And here, this one showed a wire, so this one's suspended. They do that in orchards, vineyards, keep it off the ground to get it out of the way of different things, but maybe keep it away from the critters as well. And to winterize it, just turn off your water supply, obviously, remove the end caps or take the bow out of the end of it, drain your lines, disconnect from the hose bib. Take your filters. My filters, as you see, I brought in for the winter time, and I just leave my piping out there on the ground. So you can bring it in, but you can leave it out there as well. So I think we're at question time. If we have any of those, I'll be glad to try and answer.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions for you. So a consistent one has been talking about hard water. Are there any pieces of advice that you would give to somebody who has hard water in their irrigation systems? Does that change whether they should use plastic, brass, metal fittings? And is there any special considerations for cleaning out corrosion that might, or buildup that might occur?
That is a wonderful question. And I don't know if I have a wonderful answer for it. Basically, just flushing it out is kind of the rule of thumb. I would collect rain water. That may not provide enough to water everything you're doing, but that's a great water resource for us. But just flushing it out is all you're going to probably really be able to do. We may have to do it more frequently than somebody that has a little better quality of water. I wouldn't I mean, you can clean your filter. I don't know. I wouldn't suggest using any Clorox or anything like that, but just flushing it out's kind of the main thing.
And is there any advice between material on like plastic versus brass for hard water?
That's good. Good question. Again, not authority on that. I would just purchase the plastic, and if it gets bad, you throw it away and purchase more. I know that's not a great recyclable answer, but it would function better for you, and just replace it.
Awesome. We've got a couple people that have asked about sub irrigation, like irrigation below ground versus above ground. One person, it sounds like their garden just built up over time and has covered their drip irrigation system, and wonders if that is okay or if she needs to kind of undo that. Another person was just curious if there's benefits to sub irrigation versus above ground.
Yeah, I'm not. So obviously, for a turf situation, you can't put your plastic piping on the ground, and hopefully you don't run over with the mower and all those things. So subsurface is your answer for drip for turf. Flower beds, vegetables, anything else, we can kind of leave it exposed. Again, it's just more of a maintenance thing. Excuse me, whether you can see if the emitters are working or not. So if it gets buried, that's not really a problem, other than you're just not sure if it's functioning the way you'd like it. So it's more of just an application of what's functioning for you, I think.
We've had somebody ask, how do you flush out tubing, and is it safe to use an air pressure to dry out hoses after flushing?
Yeah, so that end cap, I don't have one. That you just open, or if your tubing is bent over, we just open it up and let it drain. So this is low pressure. So how I blow it out, mine mostly gravity feed, but I will blow on the end of mine. I don't know, makes me feel better. But it's low pressure, so you don't want to put your air compressor on there and blow out your fittings or your emitters. So, but it kind of drains. You'll drain enough. You'll have space in there for freeze thaw pretty much. So I have never had to fix my pipe here, split in it because it froze or was damaged that way. Maybe I'm just lucky. I know it's in some low spots, so I think there's potential for it. But basically, you just open the valve and let it drain, and that's pretty much has worked for me.
And then I had somebody ask, how do you manage the maintenance for a drip system connected with a house bib? Do you need to remove over the winter or blow out the line?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what their connection is. If you're using something like this, we just obviously disconnect, and they'll be full of water, so you do open it up and get it drained. And I bring mine in for the winter time. It is plastic, so if there's enough moisture in there and it freezes, it will break. But typically we can get all the water out. So if you just disconnect it from your water source, whether it's on the side of the house, or if you have a frost-free hydrant out in the lawn somewhere, as long as you just disconnect it, you should be fine.
Awesome. We've got somebody who said, it's difficult to attach the drip line onto a garden hose coupling. We have to boil the water and then immerse the line into the water to soften it so it will slide onto the barbed fitting. Is there another tool or procedure which can make this process easier?
Well, I think you're doing what you got to do. You got to warm. It's easier if your piping is warm to get that in there. You can try a compression one, but it kind of takes that same kind of warmth to get it in there. So find a young neighbor, high schooler or something like that, and just do it on a nice warm day. But I do agree, it does take some strength to be able to put it together. Now there is I guess I don't have one, but these are all barbed. But you can use these type of clamps. So if you didn't have a barbed connection, just smooth, you can put your pipe on there and then use a clamp that you can just use a screwdriver or to tighten that up. And so that might be an option for us, as we don't have the capability of getting it on there the other way, which I'm at that point myself.
All right, we've got a couple more questions, but I don't know that we have time for them all. One that I saw pop up a lot was advice for keeping mice, bulls, skunks, etc., from destroying the drip irrigation systems.
Dr. Drew Ricketts gave a presentation on critters, and I will bow to him. Yeah, it's just a challenge. So that one operation of raising it above the soil line, or, if you put it up 24 inches, if that would work for you, that's one thing that commercial operations do to try and keep the critters away from the water source. Maybe if you put a pan of water out there, the critter would go to that instead of the irrigation system.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate you and your presentation. If you have other questions, be sure to contact your local extension agent or somebody from the horticulture team to answer those questions. We typically have more questions we have time for, but we will be sure to link several articles related to this session on the website, and we hope those resources will help you answer your questions. But like I said, if you need additional information, please contact your local extension office. Once again, thank you for joining us for today's K-State Garden Hour series hosted by K-State Research and Extension. We're glad you're here today to learn about drip irrigation. You can visit K-State's website to view the recorded Garden Hour archive or to make a tax-deductible donation to support the continuation of this webinar series. This session will be recorded and will be posted on the website tomorrow afternoon. After this webinar ends today, you will receive a prompt to take an evaluation survey. Please fill this out. We greatly appreciate your feedback. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at gardenhour@ksu.edu. Thanks again. We hope you will continue to tune in each month. Have a great week.